If you love stories about betrayal, resilience, and unexpected twists, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss the truth that lurks beneath the surface. Drop a comment below and tell us what you would have done in this twisted friendship saga. I still remember the exact moment when I saw that job posting. Executive Strategy Consultant. The position I'd been working toward for 8 years. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the qualifications. It was like they'd written it specifically for me. I'd sacrificed everything for this moment. The countless all-nighters through business school, living on ramen while my friends went on vacations, taking every certification course available, even when it meant missing my cousin's wedding. All for this one shot at my dream. The position was at Wilson & Mitchell, the consulting firm that transformed struggling companies into industry giants. Their reputation was unmatched, and landing a role there meant you'd arrived. I'd been following their work since my sophomore year of college, studying their case strategies, even modeling my thesis on their methodology. That night, I called Sarah immediately. We'd been inseparable since freshman orientation, roommates through college, bridesmaids at each other's weddings, godmothers to each other's future children. She knew better than anyone what this opportunity meant to me. "Oh my God, this is it! This is your job!" Sarah squealed through the phone. I could hear her genuine excitement. At least, I thought it was genuine. "We need to prep you immediately. I'm coming over tomorrow with a bottle of wine, and we're crafting the perfect application." For the next 3 weeks, Sarah became my personal coach. She reviewed my resume, conducted mock interviews in her living room, and even helped me select the perfect interview outfit. "You need to project confidence but approachability," she advised while I tried on my 4th blazer. "They need to see you leading boardroom meetings from day one." The day I submitted my application, Sarah sent me flowers with a note that read, "To new beginnings. This job was made for you." I kept those dried flowers on my desk as a reminder of her support. When the email came inviting me to interview, I screamed so loudly my neighbor knocked to check if I was all right. First round, second round, final panel. I sailed through the interview process with a confidence I'd never felt before. Sarah's coaching had polished my responses to perfection. "How did it go?" Sarah would text minutes after each interview. I'd call her immediately with a play-by-play analysis. She celebrated every small win, offered reassurance after every doubt. "I think I might actually get this," I whispered to Sarah over coffee the day before the final decision. The weight of the possibility made my voice shake. "Of course you will," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You've earned this. It's your time to shine." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining my new business cards, my name followed by that prestigious title, the corner office they'd mentioned during my tour, the projects I'd lead that would transform struggling businesses. Everything I'd worked for was within reach. What I didn't know then was that dreams can shatter in an instant, and sometimes the knife that cuts deepest comes from the hand you least expect. I had no idea that as I lay awake imagining my future, the foundation of that future was already crumbling beneath me. The morning the decision email arrived, I woke with my stomach in knots. I'd barely slept, checking my phone every 30 minutes like some kind of addict. When it finally came, I was brushing my teeth, and the notification sound nearly made me choke on my toothpaste. I remember staring at my screen, my vision blurring around the edges as I read the words over and over. "We regret to inform you that we will not be proceeding with your application." It didn't make sense. The interviews had gone perfectly. The hiring panel had practically told me the job was mine. One of them had even mentioned which projects I'd be starting with. I slid down against my bathroom wall, still in my pajamas, trying to understand what had happened. I called Sarah immediately, my voice cracking. "They rejected me," I whispered. "I don't understand." "Oh no," she said, her voice oddly flat. "That's terrible. Listen, why don't we meet for drinks tonight? My treat. You need to get out of the house." That evening, at our favorite bar, I was halfway through my second glass of wine, still dissecting every moment of my interviews, when Sarah set down her drink with deliberate precision. "I have something to tell you," she said, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I actually applied for the position too, and I got it. I start on Monday." The room seemed to tilt sideways. My glass froze halfway to my lips. "You? What?" "I know it seems a bit awkward," she continued, her eyes never quite meeting mine. "But when you mentioned the posting, it just sounded so perfect. I wasn't even going to apply, but then after helping you prep, I realized I had the qualifications too." Her words hit me like individual blows, each syllable a betrayal. All those late nights she'd coached me, she'd been studying my answers, my strategies, all while planning her own application in secret. "Why didn't you tell me you were applying?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Sarah shrugged, taking another sip of her drink. I didn't want to make it weird between us, competition and all that. I might have accepted even that, painful as it was, if not for what happened next. The bartender, who recognized us as regulars, came over to congratulate Sarah. "So you got that big job. Your friend here was telling me last week how much she wanted you to get it instead of her." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" The bartender looked confused. "Last Friday? When you were waiting for your friend here. You mentioned how you were worried about her interview performance." Sarah's face drained of color as she quickly tried to change the subject. But the damage was done. I pulled out my phone, texting a colleague who worked in HR at Wilson & Mitchell, someone I'd interned with years ago. Her response came within minutes. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but there were concerns raised about your reliability. Someone gave specific examples of you missing deadlines and cracking under pressure. I was shocked because it didn't match what I know of you." I looked up from my phone to find Sarah watching me nervously. The pieces clicked into terrible place. She hadn't just applied behind my back, she'd actively sabotaged me. "You told them I was unreliable." I could barely push the words past the knot in my throat. "You gave them examples of me missing deadlines?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, laughing nervously. "It's just business. We both wanted the same thing, and I just wanted it more." 8 years, I whispered. "I worked toward this for 8 years. And you knew that. You knew everything." "It's just a job," she said dismissively. "You'll find another one." But it wasn't just a job. It was my dream. And the person who had stood beside me, cheering me on, had been plotting my downfall all along. The flowers, the coaching sessions, the late-night pep talks. It had all been a calculated performance while she positioned herself to take what I'd worked for. As I gathered my things to leave, Sarah grabbed my wrist. "You're not going to make a big deal about this, right? I mean, we're still friends?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how I'd never seen this side of her before. The 8 years of friendship suddenly felt like a lie I'd been telling myself. "Congratulations on the job," I said quietly, pulling my arm free. "I hope it was worth it." I walked out into the cool night air, tears streaming down my face, the taste of betrayal bitter on my tongue. Everything I'd worked for had been stolen from me by the one person I trusted most. But I had no idea then that this was just the beginning, that Sarah's betrayal would spiral into something far bigger than either of us could have imagined. That night, I walked home alone through streets blurred by tears, my mind racing with all the times Sarah had positioned herself to learn my strategies, my weaknesses, my dreams. By morning, a cold clarity had settled over me. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation. No, some betrayals deserve a different kind of response. At work the next day, I smiled politely when I passed her in the hallway. "Congratulations again," I said, my voice steady despite the acid burning in my throat. The confusion that flickered across her face was almost worth it. "You're not mad?" she asked cautiously. I shrugged. "It's just business, right?" For weeks, I maintained this careful distance. Pleasant, but never warm. Professional, but never personal. Sarah kept trying to re-establish our old patterns, inviting me to lunch, sending memes like nothing had happened. I declined with vague excuses about needing time to refocus my career goals. But behind this mask of acceptance, I was working harder than ever. I started taking on freelance consulting projects, building my portfolio beyond what my current position offered. I updated my resume, focusing on quantifiable achievements. I reconnected with my professional network, scheduling coffee meetings, and attending industry events I'd previously skipped to hang out with Sarah. The irony was, losing my dream job freed me from the tunnel vision I'd developed. I'd been so fixated on that one position that I'd ignored other opportunities that might have been even better matches for my skills. "Have you considered applying to Westfield Solutions?" my former mentor suggested during one of our catch-up calls. "They're doing innovative work in exactly your field." I hadn't. They were a major competitor to Wilson & Mitchell, but I submitted my application that night. The interview process was rigorous. 6 rounds over 2 months. I didn't tell a single person at work, especially not Sarah. I'd learned my lesson about transparency. 4 months after Sarah's betrayal, I received an offer for a senior executive position at Westfield, with a salary that made my previous dream job look entry-level. I accepted immediately. 2 weeks later, the company-wide email arrived. Westfield Solutions was merging with Wilson & Mitchell, with Westfield taking the leadership role in the restructuring. I sat at my desk, reading the announcement 3 times, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. It wasn't planned revenge. It was something better. It was life offering a second chance. On my last day, Sarah cornered me by the elevators. "You're really leaving?" she asked, her voice small. "I thought we were past all that unpleasantness." I looked at her. This woman who had once known every secret, every fear, every hope I carried, and felt nothing but pity. "I am past it," I said truthfully. "This move has nothing to do with you." It was only when orientation materials arrived that I discovered the full scope of my new role. As Senior Executive of Strategic Integration, I would be evaluating which positions at both companies were redundant post-merger. I would report directly to the VP of Strategy, working closely with HR and legal to restructure departments, including Sarah's. My first day at Westfield, the VP of Strategy handed me a folder of personnel files. "We need to evaluate the team at Wilson and Mitchell," he said. "I understand you came from there. Any insights would be valuable." Sarah's file sat on top, her smiling ID photo staring up at me. 8 months ago, she had sabotaged my career without hesitation. Now, her professional fate quite literally sat in my hands. I closed the folder without opening it. "I'd prefer to evaluate everyone based on performance metrics rather than personal history," I said. "I believe that's the most fair approach." The VP nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why we hired you." I wasn't playing the game Sarah's way. I was playing the long game, one where integrity and patience had finally put me exactly where I needed to be. Not for revenge, but for redemption. And as I walked into my first executive meeting, I realized that sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. The day of the post-merger all-hands meeting arrived with an electric tension in the air. Everyone was nervous about the restructuring, about whose roles would survive and whose wouldn't. Everyone except me. I smoothed my new designer blazer, purchased with my executive signing bonus, and checked my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same person Sarah had betrayed. She was stronger, sharper, more focused. I took my place at the front of the conference room, standing confidently among the other executives while employees filed in. My eyes scanned the crowd until I found her. "Sarah," whispering to a colleague, completely unaware of what was coming. She hadn't seen me yet. "Perfect." The VP of Strategy began with standard merger platitudes about synergy and shared vision. Then he gestured toward me. "I'd like to introduce our new Senior Executive of Strategic Integration, who'll be leading our transition team." I stepped forward, my heels clicking authoritatively on the hardwood floor. "Good morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to working with each department to ensure this merger strengthens both our companies." That's when it happened. That beautiful moment when Sarah finally looked up and registered who was speaking. Her face drained of color so quickly I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again like a fish struggling for air. Two thoughts battled within me: professional dignity and raw satisfaction. Dignity won, mostly. I continued my presentation without acknowledging her, discussing integration timelines and departmental evaluations. But when I said, "Each position will be assessed based on performance metrics and strategic value to our new organization," I allowed myself the smallest pause, the briefest glance in her direction. After the meeting, I watched her frantically cornering colleagues, gesturing in my direction with barely concealed panic. I caught snippets. "Used to work together and never mentioned she was." The VP approached me as the room emptied. "You handled that professionally. I understand there might be some history there." "Nothing that will affect my judgment," I assured him. "Everyone deserves fair evaluation based on their work, not personal connections." He nodded approvingly. "That's why you're in this position and not 2 levels below." 2 levels below. Exactly where Sarah now found herself in the new org chart. Under my supervision. The cosmic poetry wasn't lost on me. Later that afternoon, a calendar invitation appeared on my screen. Sarah had requested a one-on-one meeting. Subject: reconnecting. I accepted without comment. She arrived at my new corner office the next morning, her confidence clearly shaken. Gone was the woman who had smugly stolen my dream position months ago. This Sarah fidgeted with her sleeves and couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I had no idea you'd left for Westfield," she began, forcing a tight smile. "Congratulations on the promotion. It's quite a coincidence." I leaned back in my chair. Not really. I was hired for my strategic expertise. Exactly what I would have brought to the position at Wilson and Mitchell. Sarah blanched at the reference. "About that situation." I've always felt terrible about how things played out. You understand it was just business, right? Nothing personal. The audacity almost made me laugh. Instead, I picked up her performance file from my desk. Yes, well, now we have new business to discuss. Your department has 3 people performing overlapping functions. The merger requires streamlining. Fear flashed across her face. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Evaluate your position objectively? Make decisions based on performance metrics? I set the file down. Or did you think I'd sink to underhanded tactics? For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Her waiting for me to reveal that, yes, this was my revenge, and me refusing to give her that satisfaction. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, my career trajectory. I'd like your complete performance records by Friday, I said evenly. The same as I've requested from everyone else at your level. She left my office knowing what I'd known for months. Some victories don't require scheming or sabotage. Sometimes life circles back with its own brand of justice, and all you need is the patience to be ready when it arrives. I knew Sarah wouldn't take my new position lying down, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly the situation would deteriorate. What started as cold shoulders and tight smiles in the hallway evolved into something much more sinister. Little comments in meetings, questions that undermined my authority. The digital equivalent of a knife in my back, with every email CC'd to leadership. At first, I tried to ignore it. This was a professional environment, after all. I had earned my position through legitimate means, unlike her, and I wasn't about to be dragged into petty office politics. But then reports started coming in from my team members. She cornered me after the budget meeting, my assistant confessed one afternoon, eyes downcast. She was asking all these questions about your qualifications, implying you weren't experienced enough for this role. Another colleague approached me in the break room. Just thought you should know, he whispered, glancing around to ensure we were alone. Sarah's been telling people you only got this position because you knew someone at Westfield. That you jumped the line. With each new report, I felt my blood pressure rising. This wasn't just about jealousy anymore. This was active sabotage. She was systematically trying to erode trust in my leadership, questioning my competence, my ethics, my very right to be there. During a department presentation, she interrupted me 3 times with clarifying questions that were clearly designed to make me look unprepared. I maintained my composure, addressing each with measured patience, while the VP of Strategy watched our interaction carefully. I could see the assessment in his eyes, not just of my answers, but of how I handled the underlying challenge to my authority. That was handled well, he commented afterward. But this tension isn't sustainable for the team. He was right. Something had to give. That evening, I sent Sarah a calendar invite for a private meeting in my office. Subject line: Addressing Team Dynamics. Professional. Neutral. Adult. She arrived precisely on time, her smile pleasant but her eyes cold as she took a seat across from my desk. I think we need to clear the air, I began, keeping my tone even. There's clearly tension between us that's starting to affect the wider team. I'm not sure what you mean, she replied, her face a perfect mask of innocence. Sarah, you've been questioning my qualifications to other staff members. You've suggested I didn't earn this position. She tilted her head slightly. I'm just concerned about transparency in our new organization. People deserve to know who they're working for. The audacity stole my breath for a moment. People know exactly who they're working for. Someone who earned her position through demonstrated expertise and results, not by sabotaging a colleague. Her eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's history. I leaned forward. But I'm not interested in rehashing the past. I'm interested in building a functional team moving forward. Can you commit to that, or do we need to involve HR? Involve HR? Her laugh was brittle. On what grounds? Creating a hostile work environment. Spreading false information about leadership. Take your pick. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not remorse, but calculation. She was weighing her options, determining how much damage she could continue to inflict without consequences. I think you're being oversensitive, she said finally. But if it makes you feel better, I'll be more mindful of my comments. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a real commitment. It was a thin veneer over continued defiance. That's not good enough, Sarah. I need this behavior to stop completely. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Is that all? I have another meeting. As she walked out, I realized this confrontation hadn't resolved anything. It had deepened the lines of battle. Sarah had shown her hand. She wasn't interested in reconciliation or even peaceful coexistence. She wanted war. And for the first time since taking this position, I wondered if maintaining the high road was actually the right approach. If she was willing to fight dirty, could I afford to keep my gloves on? I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls, one to our HR lead and one to the company's legal advisor. If this was going to escalate further, I needed to ensure I had both documentation and protection. This wasn't just about my dignity anymore, it was about survival. I'd always believed that truth would eventually surface, but I was learning the hard way that sometimes you need to be the one who brings it to light. Sarah had declared war, and I was done playing defense. The first sign came during the Henderson project launch, Sarah's big initiative since taking over my former team. I watched from the sidelines as it imploded spectacularly. Deadlines missed. Client expectations unmanaged. The VP of Strategy's face growing increasingly grim as the presentation unraveled. This isn't reflecting what we discussed in our planning meetings, he said, his voice tight with disappointment. Sarah's eyes darted to me accusingly, as if somehow I'd sabotaged her from afar. But I hadn't needed to. She'd done that all on her own. After the meeting, I overheard her in the hallway. If I'd been given proper handover documentation from the previous manager, this wouldn't have happened. My blood boiled. I had left meticulous notes, conducted 3 transition meetings, and offered ongoing support, which she'd repeatedly declined. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with all the little incidents, the sly comments, the undermining. Dawn found me at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and a determination I hadn't felt in months. It was time to build my case. I began methodically documenting everything. The timestamps of emails where I'd provided information she later claimed never to have received. Screenshots of shared documents showing her access history. Testimonials from team members about conversations where she'd questioned my qualifications or ethics. I recovered files from our project management system showing changes she'd made to timelines after approvals, setting impossible deadlines that guaranteed failure. I found instances where she'd removed my name from project notes and insights I'd contributed. Most damning were the email threads where she'd actively misrepresented my directives to the team, creating confusion that impacted deliverables. She hadn't just been playing office politics, she'd been systematically undermining the entire department's success just to prove I was unfit for leadership. I can't believe how extensive this is, the HR lead murmured as I walked her through my findings. This goes beyond personality conflict. The legal advisor nodded gravely. This constitutes a clear violation of our professional conduct policies. The intentional misrepresentation alone is grounds for disciplinary action. I felt no joy as I submitted my formal complaint, just a hollow vindication and bone-deep exhaustion. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to be. Sarah had been my friend, my confidant through years of late nights and career milestones. How had ambition twisted her so completely? The company moved with surprising swiftness. Sarah was called into a meeting the next morning. By afternoon, she was being escorted from the building, her access badge deactivated, her face a mask of shocked indignation as security walked her to her car. The VP of Strategy called me into his office afterward. I want you to know, he said, leaning forward across his desk, that we've been watching this situation unfold for some time. Your handling of it, maintaining professionalism despite provocation, speaks volumes about your character and leadership abilities. I nodded, unsure how to respond. This didn't feel like victory. The investigation will continue, he continued, but preliminary findings support everything you've documented. She won't be returning to this organization. As I walked back to my office, colleagues offered small smiles, nods of respect. The weight I'd carried for months began to lift, replaced by something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but peace. I hadn't stooped to her level. I hadn't fought dirty. I'd simply illuminated what was already there, hidden in the shadows. That evening I lingered after hours, alone in the quiet building. I stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. Behind me, my computer pinged with an email notification, the HR lead confirming that all team members would be briefed tomorrow, closing this painful chapter officially. I took a deep breath. The air felt cleaner somehow. My reflection in the darkened glass looked different, stronger, steadier. The betrayal would always hurt, but I realize now that I'd gained something valuable through this ordeal: unshakable confidence in my own integrity. The day of reckoning arrived with the sterile formality of a conference room booking. HR meeting confidential, the calendar invite read. I smoothed my blazer, clutching a folder containing months of meticulously gathered evidence against the woman who had once been my closest friend. Sarah arrived last, her usual confidence visibly shaken. The room fell silent as she took the only remaining seat across from me. Between us sat the HR lead, the legal advisor, and the VP of strategy, their expressions professionally neutral, but eyes sharp with attention. "Thank you all for being here," the HR lead began. "We're addressing serious allegations of professional misconduct." I watched Sarah's face as each piece of evidence was methodically presented: the timestamps of manipulated documents, the testimonials from team members, the trail of sabotage that had nearly derailed an entire department. With each revelation, her complexion paled further, her posture stiffening like a cornered animal. When her turn to speak came, Sarah transformed before our eyes, tears welling as she launched her defense. "This is clearly a vendetta," she insisted, voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "She's been resentful ever since the reorganization. These so-called documents could easily be fabricated." I remained silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been captured in digital footprints and witness statements. The legal advisor leaned forward. "Ms. Clark, we've verified the authenticity of all documents independently. The metadata cannot be altered without leaving traces, which our IT security team has confirmed are not present." Sarah's strategy shifted instantly. "We've all been under tremendous pressure since the merger. If communication breakdowns occurred, it was never with malicious intent." The VP of strategy, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. "Intent becomes irrelevant when a pattern is this consistent. One miscommunication is an accident. Dozens constitute a strategy." The deliberation was surprisingly brief. The HR lead closed her folder with a decisive snap. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated for violations of our professional conduct policy, specifically deliberate misrepresentation, sabotage of team objectives, and creation of a hostile work environment. Security will escort you to collect personal belongings. No severance package will be provided." The blood drained from Sarah's face. This wasn't the corporate slap on the wrist she'd anticipated. "You can't. This isn't," she stammered. But security was already waiting at the door. Our eyes met one final time as she stood to leave. I searched for some flicker of the friend I'd known, the woman who'd helped me move into my first apartment, who'd held my hand at my father's funeral. Instead, I found only cold fury and the hollow emptiness of someone who had gambled everything on my destruction and lost. After she left, the VP of strategy turned to me. "I want to personally apologize for what you've endured. Your position as department head will be reinstated effective immediately, with appropriate compensation adjustments." I should have felt triumphant. This was vindication in its purest form. Yet walking back to my office, my real office, with the corner window I'd worked 10 years to earn, I felt only a profound sadness threaded with exhaustion. Colleagues stopped by throughout the day, offering congratulations or sharing their own stories of Sarah's manipulations. Each conversation reinforced that I'd done the right thing, but also deepened the wound of betrayal. How had I been so blind to who she truly was? That evening, I found a photo still tucked in my desk drawer. Sarah and me at a company retreat 3 years earlier, arms thrown around each other's shoulders, laughing into the camera. Two women with bright futures, supporting each other's dreams. Or so I'd thought. I slipped the photo into the shredder without ceremony. As weeks passed, the department began to heal. Projects moved forward without the constant undercurrent of sabotage. My reinstated team flourished under transparent leadership. The company even implemented new ethics training, using our situation as an anonymous case study. I never heard from Sarah again, though LinkedIn occasionally suggested her profile, now at a smaller firm across town. Sometimes I wondered if she'd learned anything from what happened, or if she was simply plotting her next betrayal with greater caution. The hardest lesson wasn't about workplace politics or documentation. It was learning that sometimes those closest to us harbor the darkest intentions. Trust, once shattered, leaves permanent fractures. But I discovered my own strength in the ruins, a resilience forged in betrayal's fire and tempered by choosing integrity when revenge would have been easier. The truth had prevailed, just as I'd always believed it would. not through explosive confrontation or public humiliation, but through patient documentation and unwavering honesty. The victory wasn't in watching Sarah's downfall, but in reclaiming my own story, page by meticulous page. The weeks following Sarah's termination were nothing like I'd imagined. In my darkest moments of her betrayal, I'd pictured vindication feeling like triumph, a weight lifting, a wrong finally righted. Instead, I found myself sitting in my reclaimed corner office, staring at the skyline view I'd worked a decade to earn, feeling hollowed out. Colleagues kept stopping by, some offering genuine support, others fishing for gossip about the dramatic downfall of our department's rising star. I always knew something was off about her, they'd say, though none had spoken up when it mattered. Each night, I'd return to an apartment that felt too quiet. The absence of Sarah's voice, once a daily constant through calls and texts, was a void I hadn't prepared for. Betrayal, it turns out, doesn't just take your trust. It steals your memories, too. Every shared celebration, every late-night heart-to-heart now felt tainted, leaving me questioning which parts had been real. One evening, while clearing old files from my laptop, I found a folder labeled Beach Weekend, photos from a trip we'd taken just months before the merger. In one, Sarah had her arms slung around my shoulders, both of us laughing, as waves crashed behind us. I stared at her eyes, searching for some hint of the calculated betrayal to come. There was nothing but warmth. "How long had you been planning it?" I whispered to her image. "Was I always just a stepping stone to you?" The company moved forward. The projects Sarah had nearly sabotaged were back on track. My reinstated team thrived under clear leadership. The VP even mentioned expanding my department's responsibilities at the quarterly review. "You've shown remarkable resilience," he told me. "Not everyone could navigate such a personal betrayal with your level of professionalism." I smiled and thanked him, though the compliment felt strange, being praised for surviving something that should never have happened. 2 months after everything, I ran into Sarah's former assistant at a coffee shop. She hesitated before approaching my table. "I heard she's working at Meridian now," she said without preamble. "A smaller firm, but they don't know." I surprised myself by saying, "I hope it works out for her." And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven her, but because I was tired of carrying the weight of resentment. Revenge had consumed too much of me already. That night, I deleted the final digital traces of our friendship from my devices. Not in anger, but as an act of release. The investigating, the documenting, the constant vigilance. It had protected my career but eroded my peace. The following morning, my therapist asked what I'd learned from the whole ordeal. "I learned that speaking up sooner isn't weakness," I said after a long pause. "That documentation matters. That friendship and business require different kinds of boundaries." She nodded encouragingly. "But mostly," I continued, "I learned that winning doesn't always feel like winning." In the end, I got everything I thought I wanted. My position back, professional vindication, even a small promotion. Sarah got exactly what she deserved. Justice was served in its coldest, most corporate form. Yet true healing came not from her punishment, but from my gradual reclamation of joy in the work I'd always loved. From rebuilding trust with my team through transparency rather than suspicion. From recognizing that her betrayal reflected her character, not my worth. Sometimes I still catch myself scanning for threats where there are none, examining kind gestures for hidden motives. Old habits die hard. But each day gets easier as I choose trust cautiously rather than reject it entirely. The friendship is gone forever. The professional wound has scarred over. What remains is a clarity I never had before, about boundaries, about speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable, and about the quiet power of letting your work and integrity speak for themselves. I won't lie and say I'm grateful for what happened, but I'm proud of who I've become through it. Someone who knows that respect and truth always rise to the surface, no matter how deep the deception tries to bury them. Betrayal from those closest to us cuts deep, but true strength lies in rising above with integrity and patience. Revenge may feel satisfying momentarily, but facing toxic situations with courage and honesty brings lasting peace and respect. The truth, no matter how twisted the story, will always find its way to the surface.